Good morning. My name is Brian Affonso, and this is Lyndon Curry. And today we'll be talking to you about our capstone project, which is an Android peer-to-peer ad hoc networking application. So the problem. Communication is really difficult and expensive in areas where there isn't a larger infrastructure. And this affects military and people in disaster situations when there isn't an infrastructure in place already. And these are times when communication is probably the most important. So our solution was to create a peer-to-peer ad hoc networking application for Android devices. And what this does is it creates an ad hoc network on Androids, which allows them to connect to each other without the need for a larger infrastructure. We continued off of a previous capstone from future students, and our goal was to improve on the routing protocol and make it more efficient and more stable, and to improve the text messaging application and add file sharing support, and to make it more user-friendly, more functional, and more stable overall.
Okay, so our approach to this project was to split up into two separate parts. I'll work on the application side while Brian will work on the networking side. This means that Brian was responsible for moving the data between phones, while I was responsible for prepping the data for sending and handling the data once it's received. So my first job was to work with the original text messenger source code to combine that into one application. The original program was split up into two separate applications, one called TX Power Control, where the user would go into and select their own IP address. The second was called the text messenger application, where the user would actually go into that application, connect with other phones, and also start sending data to these phones. So I combined this into one single application where the user would go into and the text messenger application, find a phone to connect with, and then send data to that phone. And the program now handles IP address assignment itself. So after I did this, I built on top of the application to allow users to send files to other phones. And after this, I then updated the graphic user interface to make it more user-friendly. So while I was doing this, Brian was working on the networking side, researching new ad hoc networking protocols to work with Android and mobile networks. And once he found some useful ones, he then implemented them onto the phones and tested them out. So for this project, we worked with Android test phones to test out our application. We worked with the Android software development kit to actually build applications for the Android. We used our computers to code the programs, and we used the Eclipse integrated development environment to do our programming. We also worked with the text messenger source code to build on top of that, and Brian worked with the Circle source code to work with his ad hoc routing protocols. So in this project, I learned about Android development because I originally had no experience with the Android operating system. I also learned about networking concepts because I previously had no computer networking skills. And I learned about converting data to bytes and converting those bytes back to data, because to send data from one phone to the next, you have to get the bytes that represent it and break it up and send them into separate packets. So once they were received on the receiver side, then they had to collect the data and put it all back together to get the original data so they can actually use it. And I also learned about ad hoc networks because I previously knew nothing about ad hoc networks before I started this project.
So I learned a great deal about different ad hoc routing protocols and the difference between them, the advantages of some and others, and different ways you can connect multiple devices together. I learned Android development. I had never done anything with Android phones before, and only had a basic level of Java, which is the programming language that Android uses. So that was a big effort for me to learn how to do that. I learned how mobile networking works without the use of cell infrastructure. It's a completely different thing, and I had to learn how that works together. And then I worked on code documentation, so if people want to look at our code or expand on the app, they don't have to start from scratch again. So thank you for your interest in our capstone project. If you'd like to learn more or test out our apps, please visit us in our poster session in room 160.